This is Todd Toback, and welcome to the No Limits Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, we've got an awesome show. We've got a different show. For the first time, actually, we've got an in-person guest in studio, and we're actually going to be talking with a gentleman who closes your deals. If you've ever wondered what happens, hey, what happens when I get a property under contract? How do I handle the paperwork? How do I get paid? How does the seller know that they're going to get paid? And how do I know I get paid? Hey, Justen is the guy. I'm so excited to have him on. He owns Alliance Escrow here in San Diego, California, but I don't care what state you're in. Justen is going to give us a wealth of knowledge. We're going to talk about escrow, title, closing, attorney states. We're going to talk about how Justen invests, how he got involved in real estate. And so get ready. It's going to be a fire hose. Let's get ready to rumble. How's it going, Justen?
Doing well, doing great. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Justen, it's funny because first of all, thank you for being the first in-person guest here. Man, I'm just really excited about it.
First and the best.
So tell me, how'd you get started in real estate, Justen?
Yeah, good question. First, I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So my older brother and his friends were all in real estate and said, hey, do you want to go to college or do you want to go into real estate and make a lot of money? And I was busy, focused on football and girls. Football got terminated early by an accident, and girls just weren't that interested in me. So I turned right to real estate.
All right. So you want to get involved in real estate. So how did you end up in escrow? I mean, obviously when people think they want to end up in real estate, they think, oh my gosh, I want to flip a house, right? I want to do the HGV thing. I want to buy it. I want to, do the demo thing, the sledgehammer. People picture that. Escrow is kind of it's kind of obscure, right? I mean, how did you end up there?
Yeah. Escrow is one of those things that a lot of people don't realize they need it until they want to get paid.
Okay.
I was recruited into escrow by my business partner, Josh Baker here in San Diego, who's been in escrow for, I think 20 years. So a really long time. And I've known him since I was a little kid. But going from real estate into escrow was a whole new challenge, and it's been fun. It's been a great ride.
So I guess we could talk a little bit about partnerships here for a second, right? Because he was obviously, I'm sorry, your partner's first name again?
Josh Baker.
Josh. So Josh, he brought you in the business, right? What kind of was his skill set that, he had versus the one that you had for him to want to recruit you into the business?
Well, we both started in real estate, which was a great foundation of education. You learn the good, the bad, and the ugly, the do's and the don'ts. But then when you understand real estate and then you go into the escrow side and the closing process, it helps you know what your client is thinking. So the partnership was that he reached out and he's like, hey, you understand real estate, banking, brokering, loans. I think you'd be really, really good at this. And I'd like to have you on my team.
Okay. So let's rewind because you said, obviously you jumped from real estate to escrow, right? So, the football thing didn't work out, right?
No.
The girl thing didn't work out. It did eventually.
It did eventually.
We can come back It did eventually. But how did you, what was your first step into real estate? What was your path?
Yeah. So right out of high school, I was studying like crazy. Actually, during my junior and senior year, I was studying for my real estate exam. Okay. My goal was to graduate high school with my real estate license. I took it. I failed a bunch of times. Not once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Lucky number 5, I passed and I graduated high school with my real estate license. From there, it was easier for me to go from high school of making no money into an industry or business where you can make no money.
Right.
From there, it was just, I did what my broker told me to do. Hey, you make phone calls, you do open houses, you go door knocking, you do prospecting, everything that a real estate agent is supposed to do today, I did back then.
Okay. So you were an agent.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that question kind of spurred a whole bunch of questions into my head because a lot of people listening to this podcast right now, they have jobs, right? So they're like, oh my God, or oh my gosh, how am I going to go into real estate wholesaling, right? Where I could work, 1, 2, 3, 4 months without a paycheck, right?
Mhm.
You know, and dump marketing into my business and have the, guts to do that, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're a broker, if you're a real estate agent, pretty much you're going to be dealing with the same thing, right? So how did you, I know that you said you weren't making any money to begin with,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes my brother Tom Kroll says, rock bottom is the strongest of foundations, right?
That's a
So,
great quote. Great quote.
so my question to you is, how did you do that, mentally? I mean, what are some of the resources that you use to kind of stay afloat? Let's talk a little bit
Mhm.
about that.
So for me, I had always been a super saver, just from a very young age. I've been working landscaping, pulling weeds, raking leaves, and I just learned to save for that rainy day.
Mhm.
Um, that wisdom I think still holds true today. Um, and going from an industry of high school into a business of where you can make the money, but also it's also an industry where you can literally work 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a week and still see some success. Now it might not be as quick, but for those people that are working regular jobs and wanting to jump into the wholesale or the real estate or the flipping game, um, I think the the best thing is rock bottom is the best place to start from, and you can have success from there.
Okay, so then let's go back to you're saying that someone can, and I actually did another podcast on this, how to start real estate part-time. But you're saying, because, actually you have access to a lot of investors and
Hmm.
agents and developers. I mean, they're all in your world, right? So,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about, your opinion on someone getting started
Hmm.
part-time, right? Are
Okay.
those people, what's the difference between the ones who maybe are starting out, they have a job, right? Who
Yep.
become successful,
Okay.
and then the ones who don't, who fade away, who are the casualties of, I'm going to get my real estate license, and everyone kind of laughs, and guess what? All your friends are right. You never did anything with
Yeah.
this, right? Same thing happens in the real estate investing industry. So tell us, kind of what you see is the difference there.
So I think for the ones that are working a regular job,
Mhm.
maybe they're a CPA, maybe they're an accountant, maybe they're a teacher, maybe they're a contractor, maybe
Mhm.
they're a UPS driver, but they want to jump into this world. I think the most important thing is, one, study your tail off, and that's podcasts like this. Other podcasts, there's 1,000 of them. There's thousands of them. A YouTube. YouTube is the greatest
Mhm.
learning educator out there. And you can learn anything on YouTube.
Mhm.
Uh, Next would be to find a mentor, or somebody that you can at least kind of go underneath their wings and follow and see and peek over their shoulders as to what they're doing.
Right.
And then ask questions. For the people that are just starting out, you do all those things and then you take action, you can only have success. There is no failure option. You will see success because as you're watching people do their business and do the day-to-day things, you're going to start to do the day-to-day things. And then
Mhm.
you're going to start to incorporate a lot of those things to see success.
Right.
So there is no failed option. Um, for the people that just kind of get in, jump in like a flash in the pan and then fizzle out into nowhere, I think it's because they have their expectations, you know, a little bit off balance.
Mhm.
Their expectations is I'm going to come in, I'm going to kill it, and it's going to be like this forever.
Right.
With proper expectations, that's where you're going to have longevity in this business. Uh, and I think that is probably one of the biggest things is the people that fizzle out is they think they're going to come in, I'm going to make a gazillion dollars,
Right.
and it's always going to be perfect. It's always going to be easy, rainbow and sherbet ice cream.
Right.
But it's not like that. There is a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of valleys. There's a lot of lull moments. And I think it's the endurance and the action that just keeps pushing you through that to see the success is the difference of the ones that actually follow the mentors, listen to the mentors, go to masterminds, go to meetup groups,
Mhm.
listen to podcasts. Those are the ones that will actually, do things and be in it for a long period of time.
Right. Let me switch gears for a second. You obviously got into escrow because your partner
Hmm.
brought you in.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us, sometimes they run into something accidentally and then they say, hey, this is for me. Right. Um, but let's kind of jump in. What is the difference between, a lot of people refer to title and escrow or closing companies, or attorneys, and they kind of jumble them all together.
Hmm.
Right. So, for the purpose of this this episode, right? I think title and escrow closing, I often refer to them as one thing just to not confuse, right? But what is the difference between title and escrow?
Good.
Right? And let's start with that question.
Okay, so very broad, basic. Title and escrow can be one and the same. There would be a title company that has an escrow company. In Southern California, where we are in San Diego, we have independent escrow companies. The difference between title and escrow is the glue to the entire transaction that facilitates all of the monies. So all of the monies come in, the earnest money or the EMD comes into escrow.
Right.
We manage all the payoffs. We manage all the paperwork. We manage all the legalities within that. We work with, on average in escrow, there's 35 parties to one transaction.
Right.
Title, their job is one, to actually look at the title, the legal investing on the property to make sure that it's a clean and clear property. So we don't have a clouded title.
Did you say 35 parties, by the way, in a transaction there?
One real estate transaction has on average 35 people.
So
35 parties.
For a traditional transaction with a loan.
Traditional.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I need to have more compassion, by the way, on my title and escrow companies.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, if you're listening to the show, I have an awesome checklist for you guys to download. If you go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/title checklist. Go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/title checklist. I actually have a checklist that we use with our title companies or escrow companies, however you want to refer to them, on our expectations, and also kind of reset kind of what the standards of operation are. So if you guys want to go there, nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/title expectations. Did I say that? Title expectations?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's because we haven't set up the link yet. So I just made that up on the spot.
Perfect. Love it. On the fly, baby.
Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Why don't we make that title checklist? Sorry, title checklist. So nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/title checklist. So the time you listen to the show, it'll be set up. So tell us a little bit, Justen, about, you got the 35 people. Obviously, the lender is a big part of that, and the appraiser and all that other stuff. How do you be an awesome client, right? You come in and, you move to the front of the line, right? Because obviously there's been escrow companies where we've done a lot of transactions, right?
Yeah.
We've done a lot. And so we've had some escrow and title companies where we're like, hey, these guys aren't going to work. And then with others where there's, these guys are awesome. And then we've had some where they started out great and then they've, faded.
Yeah.
Right. So I always kind of look at, okay, how do I clean up my side of the street first? Right. So if you have a client who comes in, a real estate agent really is, I guess, the client or the wholesaler, because they're bringing the transaction there. And then of course you've got the buyer and the seller and all that other stuff. But let's say you have a real estate investor. Let's start there. Right?
Okay.
And not your regular homeowner, because a real estate investor is going to do multiple transactions.
Yes.
Right. So they come in, and not from a real estate agent perspective, investor comes in. How do you be an awesome client?
Okay. To be an awesome real estate investor, first thing is you have to manage your expectations of all the parties and people around you. The good ones are, for the most part, pretty humble, compassionate and caring, high integrity and high character. With those things, you're going to want to know, what are the things that I will see throughout this transaction, and try to have them up front. So what I mean by that is, if you know that you're going to be going through a transaction and you're going to have certain documentation, or you're going to use a certain LLC for a real estate investor, you're going to want to have your articles of incorporation. You're going to want to have all your LLC docs. You're going to have your statement of information, authorized signers, all of that in a nice, pretty package, because you're going to want to give that to either the title company or the escrow company.
Right.
In this case, you're going to want to send it to the escrow company.
Okay.
And then also, when you're opening a transaction, you're going to want to you want to lay out all of the details, from beginning to end. By this such and such date, we want this. By such and such date, I'd like to have this done. By such and such date, I'd like to have this done. These are the parties that are on my team. So whether it's my TC, which is a transaction coordinator, my lender, if it's a hard money lender or a private lender, And you're going to want to, in that opening email, just lay out everything. If you can do all that up front and you have a great rapport, you have charisma, and you have good expectations, you're going to be an awesome client. You're going to have a smile. You're going to want everybody to win on the transaction, including title and escrow and lenders and everybody else.
So it seems like actually, like real estate investors in general, if they're not using traditional financing, actually it seems like they're going to be an easier client, usually because there's not an appraisal or a lender or a traditional lender. Correct. They're not going to be as picky. And by the way, that's something that I've never thought of, by the way. We've always been like, hey, we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. And real, it's interesting because we switched an entity out at the last minute the other day, and we knew up front that we were going to be using a different entity, and we threw it in at the end, right? And I could tell a little frustration on the titles part.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, that's really, really, really good. So, I think step one, and I'm going to, send an email to my team afterwards, is that number one, have your articles of incorporation, have your vesting, have all the authorized signers, have everyone on your team. Obviously, if you're doing, 6 or 7 transactions a month and everything's the same, obviously.
Yeah. Usually title and escrow is going to keep that and save it on their desktop,
right? Or
save it in their secure storage.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. How do you like to invest, Justen?
Yeah. I dabble in a little bit of everything. So, to give some context, so coming from the real estate side and the mortgage banking and brokering side, I was introduced to investing the hard way, which was right in 2007 and 8 when the market was at an all-time high and it just went way down to the bottom.
Right.
I had traditional business at the time that I literally could not give away fast enough.
Right.
I couldn't reduce the price quick enough to entice a buyer to bite on it or to buy it. From there, I had this gentleman approach me, hey, I have this idea. And I think at the time I was 22 years old.
Right.
I was really young. So I'm always curious and had no idea what was going on. Basically, long story short, he's like, hey, I want to buy this thing and I want to flip it all in 1 week. I'm like, wow, this is great. And oh, by the way, you get to be my agent and you can have dual agency.
Right. Can you explain what dual agency is really quick?
Dual agency in the real estate for realtors or real estate agents is where you represent the seller and the buyer at the same time. You have a fiduciary duty to both parties to equally negotiate a fair and acceptable price.
Which is very tough to do.
Which is very tough to do, but it can be done.
Right.
And there's a lot of agents that are very successful at it.
Right.
So I saw a great opportunity. I had 4 listings. Hey, I want to do it on 2 of your properties.
Right.
I was like, great. Which hindsight, this opportunity, I was like, wow, man, this is awesome. 2 of my contracts, 2 of my listings that I could not get rid of or give away just went like that.
Right.
So
I'm assuming the sellers took a haircut in price.
Always. Yeah. And they were short sales.
Yeah.
So, fast forward, he basically strung me all the way to the end because he didn't know what he was doing. He was learning everything on the fly.
Right.
And I ended up having one of my clients have to file a bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure.
Right.
And it was able to actually successfully do a sale on one of them, but not with him, but with a buyer that we negotiated even way lower of a price. So to really hit home on this, he brought up this idea and my curiosity got to me.
Yeah.
And then I went home that night and literally I researched, I Googled, I went on every single YouTube channel I could to find out and figure out, I'm like, wow, this sounds great.
Right.
And from there, I spent the next 6 months just deep dive into information and knowledge. I didn't have what we have today, like the podcast and your mentorship or any of the other coaching schools or anything like that. From what I gathered, there was Carlton Sheets way back then.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. And from there, that's what triggered my curiosity. I was like,
2007 is basically Stone Age. I mean, the amount of content that wasn't there or podcasts that weren't there. I mean, I remember in when I think it was 2009 that I had met with a seller, right, personally. And he had this new thing called an iPhone. Right. He had a new thing called an iPhone, and it was a computer. He was like a total tech geek. And it was like, the first week of the first release of the first phone,
man.
and I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like everybody has an iPhone now,
Mm-hmm.
so learning back then, you don't have all the tools. You didn't have all the lists that you could pull. You didn't have the software.
Oh my gosh,
You
no.
didn't have the apps. You didn't have Redfin to do comps or
No.
Zillow. I mean, none of that was there, right? I mean, they had all this antiquated software. So that's really interesting that you learn. The cool part about that though, and kind of just break it into going off topic a little bit, is I actually have gotten some of my best deals from incompetent
Yes.
agents, right? Because they were representing the seller and, they let it go so far and there was a ton of reductions. And if they would have done things right up front, they would have gotten them. But because this drug out, the seller finally was at their wit's end and we did the deal, right? And the seller was, basically just ready to dump it. So going back to that, you said you were getting started and you learned what you're doing, like fix and flips or wholesaling or keeping them as rentals.
I was doing what we would call a concurrent escrow.
Okay.
California law says we can do concurrent escrows. What is known throughout the country would be called a double escrow.
Okay.
Or a double close.
Yeah, concurrent close. Okay.
Concurrent close. But in California, double escrow is illegal.
Okay.
So I had learned that at the very beginning.
Okay.
And to really rewind all the way back to the beginning of my career, I learned how to do RAPs, which would be, or an AITD, all-inclusive trust deed. And those are all different aspects of investing.
Right.
I did my very first transaction was the AITD.
Okay.
And I had no idea what I was doing.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what an AITD is?
All-inclusive trust deed is basically where you're going to take a seller that has a property and you like the numbers based on whatever criteria that you've set for yourself.
Right.
And you want to acquire this property, but you don't necessarily want to get you don't want to get financing, bank financing, conventional financing. So you'll do an AITD, all-inclusive trust deed, where you basically wrap their mortgage, keep it current in their name.
Right.
You start making payments, you pay everything, but now you just acquired a property utilizing that seller's name and their current existing mortgage.
Right. So it's interesting. We just did a subject to transaction in Florida. We talked about that, but it's one of a deal that I bought actually in Spring Valley. Back in 2011, this was like the bottom, it was like you could not give away properties. And I found a house that was worth about 250, 260 at the time. And the guy owed 380 on the thing. Right.
Wow.
So he's sitting there and his payments are like $2,700. So I took it title subject to the existing financing. And I'm like, I don't want to hold this as a rental, right? The negative cash flow was too great. So I took it on an AITD, right? And I then assigned the whole deal to an end user.
Nice.
So I took 30 or 40K up front for the deal. And by the way, the guy knew he was $150,000 upside down, like from the beginning, right? And I'm just like, why would anyone, do this? Well, again, he paid he paid about 420, for the house. It was worth about, two. I mean, the spread was huge and he got in for 30 grand. Yeah. And it was really, really hard to get a loan. Well, anyway, he just resold that. And I know that because they made us, title had a problem with the original paperwork.
The chain.
Yeah. So we did like kitchen table closing. Yep. So title called me up and they closed, and guess how much he just sold it for?
Spring Valley, 650.
675, right? 675. And so I was just laughing. I was like, man, this guy got this, for 30 grand down, and he made 250K on the deal just by sitting and waiting, even just buying at like the perfectly wrong time on a house that was completely upside down with a bad interest rate, and he made it work.
But you actually bring up a great point, because for escrow and title actually, what I'm getting to is the chain of title was disrupted.
Right.
And because they had to come find you years later because there was an issue, a discrepancy on their chain.
Right.
In order for them to be able to sell that clean and clear title, they had to kind of clean up some of the mess, which would have been the subject to, or an affidavit of uninsured deed,
right,
or anything like that. And that's what title insurance does. Title insurance protects the new buyers,
right,
to make sure that there are no other claims on title.
So let me ask you this. So what if you have, and I think if you've been in the business for any length of time
Mhm.
and you have someone an old party who's just not cooperating, right? Now they're not arguing. They're not saying I own the property, but they're just saying I'm not going to sign anything.
Yeah.
Right. What does title do? What does escrow do? Or is there nothing, right? You basically can't have clear title.
Well, I don't want to, completely speak for title because they would actually send that up to their legal chain.
Sure.
However, from what we have seen in those situations, say we have somebody, Uncle Leo, that's on title and, he's, in Arkansas, just hanging out and he's got a $100,000 lien on the property, and we can get a hold of Uncle Leo, but he's busy, doing whatever he does. And he's
Right.
like, I just don't want to sign anything. Sometimes we can either force, which would be get a court order.
Right.
The new buyers and the seller would force that order to get executed.
I mean, that sounds like it would take months.
It can take a little bit of time.
Okay.
It can take a little bit of time. Or what sometimes they will do is they'll bond around it.
Okay.
So
so let's talk about this, right? Bond around it. That sounds sexy.
yeah,
Okay.
it's basically an instrument that title will use to protect their chain of title and their assets.
Okay.
They will actually go and secure a bond, which would be like an insurance policy
Right.
that says if Uncle Leo ever tries to pull anything, this bond would cover any negligence that he may cause on this chain.
Okay. So you can purchase those bonds.
You can purchase those bonds.
Okay. What percentage of the value, are these bonds? And just, I'm not asking you for definite. I'm just saying because I actually I've never used one, by the way.
Oh,
so I'm just curious.
Yeah. It's not crazy, terribly expensive. Let's just say you have $100,000 just because that's the number that's out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're less, sometimes they're like 25,000. Like that would be the discrepancy on title. It could be anywhere between $500 to $1,500.
Okay.
So it's the cost of that bond. It's like an insurance policy.
It's almost like a secondary insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're going to cover the deductible.
Yes.
Kind of. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of your favorite books, Justin. By the way, I absolutely love your escrow company. Super professional, super fast. So check them out, by the way. This is how you spell it right here, Alliance Escrow. If you have deals in California. By the way, do you do deals all over California?
All over California. We can service all the way from the border of San Diego to the border of Oregon.
Okay, sweet. So what are your favorite books?
Favorite books. Right now, I'm reading Joe Fairless's multifamily syndication book.
Okay.
One of my all-time, I have a set stable. So for a newer investor, teenager, even somebody that would like just a little bit extra help on personal finance,
right?
It would be The Richest Man in Babylon, by George C. Clausen.
Mm-hmm.
I buy that book and I give it away.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the greatest books out there. For a salesperson or somebody that wants to learn more sales, it would be The Ultimate Sales Machine.
Okay.
By Chet Holmes.
Yep, great book.
Great book. Mm-hmm. And I'm an avid reader, so I read a ton of books. Obviously, you have Kiyosaki, a lot of his stuff, and it just really depends on what you're interested in.
Yeah. Man, can we break into The Richest Man in Babylon for a second?
Yeah,
because
totally.
I was just recommending this to somebody. And, one of the things that I see, which is I was just reading The Compound Effect
Great
last night again, probably for like I've read about a dozen times.
Yeah.
And what he talks about is stop going for the quantum leap, right? And, stop going for this new sexy thing. And what I love about Richest Man in Babylon, it's look, if you're just saving a certain portion of your income and investing it and not spending it, right? You can't help but the force of nature to become rich, right?
Yep.
You just can't. Another one of the laws in that book, though, was don't get distracted with, usurious returns, right? So I think a lot of people, they get stuck with a shiny object, right? And that's, I also look at it as the big investment, like the stock tip that somebody's looking at,
right.
And they get distracted from what's working. So, for right now, another point in the book was saying, hey, you need to keep making money in the trade that you already know.
Yep.
So for example, I've known you, I don't know, now maybe 6-7 years.
Yeah.
And you're still in escrow.
Yeah, still here.
Right? Still escrow, still building the company, still building your stature, right? And you're making money, but you're taking that money and you're making it grow through disciplined study, right? So you've talked about syndicating apartment buildings, and I'll let you talk about it if you want to talk about the deal that you're working on now.
Sure.
But, 2 weeks ago, you were talking about apartments.
Yep.
Today, you're talking about apartments, right? And then we talked about what your goals are for next year, and it sounds like it's still apartments, right? Yeah. And so the one thing that I see about people who are successful, and the richest man in Babylon, if you had to, summarize it, was like, pick a freaking lane, right? Yep. Work that lane, make money, invest that money, and don't get distracted. And over time, you're going to get really, really, really rich, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's one of the best books out there. And I mean, it's been around for a really long time. And it's like, don't go for the grand slams.
Yeah.
Go for the singles and the doubles. Occasionally you'll get a triple.
Yeah.
On investment terms, on investment returns.
Yeah.
And I think, if you stay conservatively and you stay diligent and disciplined, there's a term in the stock market, it's called dollar cost averaging. You set a figure that you're comfortable investing. And a lot of times I get approached by people that say, hey, Justen, I just don't have any extra money at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And a lot of the books and a lot of wisdom tells you, well, why does it have to be at the end of the month? Why don't you just start at the beginning of the month?
Right.
With what you have? And I don't care if you start with $10, $5, $25. Just start with something.
Right.
Get that muscle habit going. Once you start strengthening that muscle, it's just going to become repetition, and then it'll become habit. And then eventually, 20 years down the road, you're going to be far better off than you were back then.
All right. Well, this brings me back to my last three questions.
Cool.
What's next for you? Right. I mean, obviously we're talking a little bit about apartments. Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I've been really, for the last, since 2007, buying and selling properties. One of the things I've learned, and I interview and I study a lot of very well-to-do people in the space that I actually want to go. The thing that I've learned from them is that, you can make great money short-term. You can make amazing money long-term.
Right.
So from that, which was buying and selling properties, taking that margin and then pouring it into more of the longer-term money, more of the passive income money, mailbox money. So whether that's buying your first rental,
right,
and seeing $200 a month, I get excited.
Right.
I get excited about those little returns because I know over the 20-year term that $200 will grow to $500 to $700 to $1,000 to maybe $1,500. And then there's another cool rule on top of that, which would be like stacking.
Right.
A friend of mine says it's the 10X rule. You take, if you had 10 properties and you buy one every year, and then eventually you start pouring all the excess cash that you're making onto the principal of the next one and the next one, within a certain amount of time, you're going to be making some really good money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the things that I'm really interested in right now is apartments. Once I transitioned into that long-term mindset, I really started looking more and more into apartments, diving deep into the education of it. So right now, I have a 13 unit that has been a fun nightmare,
right?
Because it's not always, again, rainbows and sherbet ice cream.
Yeah.
I have a 20 unit that has been great. I'm currently we're building out a 76 unit. Getting ready to close on that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And that one should be a really good project.
Why is your 13 unit a nightmare? Where's it located?
That one is in Idaho.
Okay.
I think the nightmare, and again, I say nightmare, but it's been a great learning experience.
Right.
It's all learning. The challenge, what's nightmare about it is the unknowns that I didn't know.
Right.
So that's all it is.
Okay.
Learning how to, evict people.
Right.
Learning how to deal with people that are mentally unstable.
Right.
People that are on drug addiction, alcohol addiction, a lot of these things. The thing it's also taught me is to have compassion.
Right.
On people. I think when you give a little bit of honey, you get more bees.
Right.
And that goes across the board for anybody that's mentally unstable, has a drug addiction or anything else like that.
Right.
Show them a little compassion, and you'd be surprised what happens. So
you're managing these, you're managing this one yourself?
I have a manager,
okay,
but I manage the manager.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Well, before I ask you how he got a hold of you, obviously, eventually you got the girl, right?
Yes.
So
yeah,
let's bring this full circle right here, because
Perfect.
maybe your wife's going to be watching this. Why don't we tell this story? The guy who couldn't get a girl, because you have 4 kids, right?
I have 3.
You have 3 kids,
Yep.
right? So obviously you got the girl, had the kids. Tell us that story just for fun.
Yeah. So struggling real estate agent. I was surfing all the time here in San Diego, and met this girl, and I said, hey, the funny story is, this is a good story on a sales. I asked her out. She said no. We started hanging out as friends. I said, hey, we should be a little bit more exclusive. She said no. And
Twice. Okay.
Twice. So clearly I didn't get the message.
No, I really like the way that you're easing your way in there, right? For me, I'm really bad at the ease, right? So you just said, no, this is not going to work. Let me try the sneak attack.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep going.
If you can't go through the front door, go through the side window.
Yeah.
So then the third time I said, hey, I need to really, where are we going with this? Are we just going to be friends, or can we make something happen?
She's like, I already told you, right?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And the third time was a charm. She's
Okay.
like, all right, yeah, we can be more than friends. And
Right.
so fast forward, got married, waited 5 years to have kids, traveled a bunch. And now I have a 4, 6, and 8-year-old, 2 girls and a boy. And they're so much fun. And my wife, Heather, she's an amazing person. She's super strong mom, super strong spouse, and always supportive.
Awesome. By the way, people got to check out your Facebook page. You're an outdoor adventurer. And I always think I'm like an outdoor adventurer, but you are like always out there. I mean, with a camping schedule and a photo reel to definitely be envied.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I'm incredibly blessed. And I love to share my blessings with all those that are around me.
Yeah.
The way to find me is on Facebook. That's one of the best places. And my name is unique. It's Justen, Brown like the color. So there's nothing special about the last name, but Justen Brown on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin. Really, really appreciate it. Remember, go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/title checklist to get the checklist that we use to set expectations with title companies. And if you use this, it's going to make your transactions just go so much smoother. Title companies are going to want to work with you. You're going to be at the top of their list when you've got their files, and you're just going to make more money. So thank you so much, Justin.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.